Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 18 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to the man, the myth, the legend, J.J. Abrams and his works and his universe. My name is Matt Crandall, here with my co-host Marcelo Inostroza. Today we are taking a look at the season 3 finale of Alias, episode 22, entitled Resurrection, written by Jeff Pinkner, directed by Ken Olin, where finally all of the things that have been going on in the third season with Katya, Nadia, Lauren, Vaughn, all start to come to a head in a big action-packed finale that, spoiler alert, if you didn't know, we always do spoilers on these things. What's the point otherwise? Finally takes Lauren from, maybe redeemable supervillain to irredeemable supervillain, and ends up having Vaughn shoot her dead multiple times in a horror-style finale where she comes back like Michael Myers, refusing to die. But this episode opens with a very Mission Impossible-esque scene where Lauren, in a full-on Sidney Briscoe disguise, comes in, steals some files from the CIA, and makes her way out. And then later in the episode, Sid dresses up in a Lauren mask to fool Sark. So there's a lot of Mission Impossible-esque stuff going on here as we sort of ramp up the action and try and get this whole Vaughn's wife mess out of the way so that Vaughn and Sidney can have a clean slate going into season 4. Marcelo, I know you liked Lauren at first, then felt betrayed when they made her supervillain. How did you feel in this final episode where she got murdered?
Now, you people who are listening to this right now might think that I'm a masochist. And even before your brain goes there, I will just tell you I'm a masochist. I love seeing people suffer on screen for some reason. I have a little bit of masochistic in me. With that being said, I did like the fact that they totally leaned into Lauren's bad woman persona. I mean, for God's sakes, when she makes her way out of the CIA after impersonating Sidney, she shoots a poor guy, like a random guy who asked her if she was okay the second she walked into the street.
She also shoots Marshall, which is like a pretty big moment because it's a guy we actually care about.
That is true, but the other thing that I did find interesting is in the final confrontation between Sidney and Lauren, it didn't make sense to me, at least it didn't track with me as, why did Lauren tell Sidney that final piece of information? She didn't have to. Since Lauren was introduced, we understand that Lauren has always seen Sidney as a threat to her relationship with Vaughn. So I thought that was a little bit of exposition that didn't have to be there, although I do understand why Jeff Pinkner put it there. But to me, that kind of distracted just a little bit from the final confrontation between Sidney and Lauren. Also, I didn't like the fact that the way that Lauren ultimately made her exit. If you're going to kill someone, you want to shoot them in the head. Mm-hmm. But I completely understand, ABC, the censors. I get it. That is a little bit much. But when I want to kill a character in a story that I'm writing, and I don't want to bring them back, I always go for the head. But that's just a little minor gripe that I didn't like. It's minor. It's nothing that took away from my overall enjoyment of this episode. And you mentioned too, Matt, this episode has a very Mission Impossible tinge to it. And I just love the use of disguises in this episode. Also, I love the use of the voice analysis thing that Sidney points out to Sark after she reveals herself to him in the jail cell. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you know what? I like this. I really, really dug this episode, which was surprising to me because if you listened last week, you guys know that I was completely disappointed with what they did with Lauren overall.
Yeah, and I think, that makes this episode more fun, is that they do focus a lot on the spy and the espionage stuff, and there's nothing better than, when Sark rats out Lauren and gives her up, and then Sydney reveals that it was actually her that was in the cell. It's such a satisfying moment because Sark gets his and he's being a coward at the same moment, so it's like a double whammy. So that's fun for us as an audience. And of course, the stuff with Rambaldi and Sloane and Nadia starts to move forward a bit. But yeah, that final confrontation with Lauren that's taking place on the top of the hatch from Lost, almost, it feels like, because they've got like this weird dig site thing going on and like a big shaft. And when she, is fighting with Sydney and she's like, oh, I know something you don't know. And it's like, okay. And then she's like, there's information that you were never meant to see, and here's exactly where it is, and here's the code. It did feel like a little bit much, and I know that they wanted to have some sort of cliffhanger because they were going to kill off Lauren. That couldn't be the cliffhanger. So they give this final little tidbit where Sydney shows up at the very end, opens the safety deposit box in this bank, and reads some shocking blacklight classified CIA documents and starts to cry. And then Jack walks in and says, you were never meant to see any of this. And so it leaves us like, oh my God, what was that? What was in these files? And, we aren't there yet, but when we find out what was in those files, it feels like whoever set up that final scene got outvoted when it came time for season 4, when they were like, here's what I think was in there. And they were just like, nope, we're just forgetting that. We're going to gloss over it. We're going to make it this, and then just put that whole storyline to bed. It doesn't matter. But in this episode, it feels like a big moment, and Garner kills it when she's, really crying as she's reading these documents. You feel her pain and you wonder what is in there. But that showdown with Lauren where she's almost superhuman and has to be shot 18 times feels like a bit much, but it's supposed to be a catharsis for Vaughn. And like I said, showing the Sid and Vaughn shippers that, they're done with the Lauren stuff and we can move on from it.
The other thing about that final confrontation between Lauren and Sydney at the very end, after Lauren goes down to visit Juliet in the pit, for those of you who've seen Lost, You get it. I was very struck by the choice of music that Michael Giacchino used in that final embrace between Sydney and Vaughn. It had a very, very lost tinge to it. You could hear like subtle notes to the Lost score. Like I don't know if that was just me or did you hear some of that as well?
No, I definitely think there are some similarities, and I thought that the score that Giacchino has been using has been getting better and better each season of Alias, and there definitely are shades of that familiar Lost sound that he would develop more, on that show, but definitely there is some shades of it crossing over.
One thing that came to my mind about the way that Vaughn's character was developed this season is that this is something I wanted to bring up last week, but I completely forgot. Is that once we find out that Lauren is a British bad woman, to use my term from last week, Vaughn really goes from I love my wife to I may not trust my wife to I want to kill my wife. There's no middle ground. The one thing that I love about the way that the Jack Bristol character is ultimately defined and written is that, the second that Arena shows up, Victor Garber does such a good job at showing the conflicted nature of the way that he really thinks about his ex-wife. I wish that the writers would have told Michael Vartan, there you see I remembered his name again.
Yeah.
I wish that they would have told him to act a little bit more conflicted as to the way that he felt about his British bad woman wife. If he would have felt a little bit more conflicted, it's not that I would have felt for Vaughn's situation ultimately when he had to shoot Lauren, because truth be told, you guys know that I don't really like Vaughn. I'm sorry. But that to me would have gone would have worked a little bit more if he would have shown a little bit more conflicted emotions towards Lauren once he found out what her true goal was or who she was working for, uh, uh, in the first place. I thought that was a missed opportunity by the writers. I think that's a plot hole that they didn't want to address or they didn't even want to bother with.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
No, I think you're right. I think they just didn't feel like spending the time on it, or they just weren't thinking about it. The other thing that I'm kind of conflicted about with this episode too is that the dynamic with Irina wasn't really in this season, so they brought in Isabella Rossellini as her sister Katya to sort of be like the stand-in for Irina. And Katya started up like her thing with Jack, and we're not sure whether we can trust her or not. And in this, she had stabbed Vaughn and she set a trap for Sydney, and she tries to kill Sydney, but Sydney sort of gets the best of her and takes the bullets out of the gun and then shoots her. And I just feel like it would have been so much more powerful if they had found a way to bring back the mother character instead of just this, evil aunt who they don't do much with, which again feels like, I don't know if Lena Olin just didn't want to come back and she was out or what, but there's a lot that this episode does right, but you can tell this is the first finale of Alias that JJ didn't write, and it just doesn't feel as powerful or have those strong family ties that the JJ finales usually throw in there.
As much as I liked it, I will agree with you that her character. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now. I'm losing my brain here. Her character didn't resonate with me at all. Like I could have cared less about her character or why she was brought in there. The interesting thing that the interesting little quirk that I thought was interesting was when she goes to shoot Sydney and she finds out that the gun is empty. I was like, that's not the way you clear a weapon. You took out the clip. You took out the clip, but you forgot about the one in the pipe.
Yeah.
I just have to assume that when Sydney cleared the weapon, she took out the clip and she took out the one in the pipe. Because if she forgot to take out the one in the pipe, it would have been a very, very short show.
I'm going to assume that, yeah, we just, she did that without us noticing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. That's me nitpicking. This episode brought up a section of Alias that I haven't really thought about yet. And that section is what belief does to people and what people will do because of what they believe in. And what I mean by that is I started to really think about the psychological mindset of Sloane in this season, right? Mm-hmm. He reminded me of someone that you, Matt, know very well. I'm sure you've seen this movie 1,000 times like I have. But he reminded me of Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Specifically when he goes to see his daughter and plead with his daughter to come in, to come on this search and look for this Rimbaldi MacGuffin, right?
Yeah, the sphere of life or whatever.
Well, yeah, where he says it's a ball and it has all the answers to the universe, right?
Yeah.
In that particular scene, all I could hear is, Indiana, this is what we got into archaeology for in the first place. Right. It's a radio for talking to God.
Yeah.
So I found that scene to hit me, that it hit me in such a profound way, not for what was happening, but for the parallels that I made to Sloane and Belloc in that specific scene. And it's very interesting to me what the power of belief does to people and the things that they will do because of what they believe in. Yeah. To the same extent, we could say that about religion, but we're not gonna talk about religion in this podcast. I mean, you could just say that the power of belief is very, very swaying to what ultimately people do about their emotions and what they believe in. And I thought that that was a very interesting little note that I picked up there.
Yeah, for sure. And there are lots of sort of Indiana Jones-esque comparisons because of the Rambaldi and the fact that everything they're chasing is a MacGuffin and all that. And Sloan and Belloc certainly do have some stuff in common. I do think that what they tried to do with Sloan this year, where last year, everything that happened ended up being as a result of Sloan's manipulation, and ended up being, even when SD6 went down and the CIA thought they had won, it turns out it was all a manipulation by Sloan to reset the board. This season was more of kind of like half of it was the redemption of Sloan. Like, they tried to make him more redeeming. They put him on the good guys team. He went out on missions. And I feel like they were trying to soften the evil side of him so that they could use him more like a member of the team going forward. But then they still throw in those few shades where, he will do anything when it comes to the quest for Rambaldi, whether it's right or wrong, because he believes anything that he has to do to uncover these secrets is worth the price. So as much as they did some rehab on him to redeem him, we still know that, like, deep down, he will do whatever it takes when it comes to Rambaldi, because he believes that is his life mission. They didn't take it all the way in this. There's still more for him to do. So I'm interested to see where they take Sloan in the future, now that they have gone from, entirely mustache twirling villain to a guy whose allegiance will be a lot more fluid depending on who can help him in this ultimate quest that he's on.
The attempt by the writers, as you put it, to soften up Sloan and make him more of an anti-hero, you might not be surprised to hear this, but that didn't work for me one bit.
Right.
I still think that guy deserves a bullet in the head somewhere.
Yep.
And all that being said, the reason why I feel so vile about Sloan is the way that he was written, first of all, in the earlier seasons, and the way that he's acted. Mm-hmm. If he wasn't acted so well, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I'm not that guy.
Ron Rifkin.
Thank you.
Is the actor. Yeah. He's awesome.
Yeah. If Ron Rifkin didn't play him so well, I wouldn't be so invested in him seeing his end. And as I said last week, and I've said in previous episodes of this podcast, I think that's a credit to the overall character construction of Sloan. But if I may, the final stinger of this episode really saved the season for me. Really saved the second half of the season for me, because when I saw Sydney sitting there reading through the files, I was like, is this going to be about Project Christmas, or is this going to be about another nefarious thing that Jack or Irina did?
Right.
And the thing that I found hilarious is that it's called Project 47, right? Mm-hmm. And if you guys out there know any pop culture at all, 47 means something to you. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is she part of the agent program?
Right.
If you guys play video games, you'll know what I'm getting to.
Hitman.
Right. But that's neither here nor there. So I found it very interesting that whoever made up that file, or the production designer, or the writers, for example, when they introduced the number 47, I wonder if that went through their heads. Will there be members of our audience who connect this to Hitman? Mm-hmm. I wonder if they thought to themselves, is that something that we want, or is that something that we don't want? Because another spy program did something very similar to that. As a matter of fact, I think it was a blatant ripoff. James Cameron did a spy series in the early 2000s called Dark Angel. And if you watch that thing, that is a complete ripoff of the Hitman mythology. I don't care what you say. even though James Cameron is a genius, but I'm like, I'm calling foul on that. But I'm not above creators who do derivative material of other things. But I really like the fact that in that particular scene, again, Sydney is reminded that although she's trying to trust her father, she can't completely trust him because he's still got skeletons in his closet. And I'm very interested to see how their father and daughter relationship will progress as we move towards more seasons of Alias here.
That's the interesting thing. I think that end stinger is supposed to possibly shake that up, and we'll have to tune in when we talk about season 4 starting next week to see whether that's the case or not. So if you were going to grade this finale, Marcelo, what would you give it?
I really liked it. I loved the Mission Impossible stuff. I loved everything with my British Batwoman. She was just great. The fact that she just went nuts.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. There are some negatives that I mentioned before, but with all that aside, and I thought this was great. So if I would grade it, I would give it a C minus.
Okay, and I'm going to go B. I'm going to give it a B. I thought that the espionage stuff was fun enough, and the fact that now Lauren is dead and gone had me cheering, and very interested to see what they decide to do next season, and knowing that JJ is coming back for the first 2 episodes of season 4 to kind of give his farewell to Alias means that our listeners should definitely tune in when we talk about that premiere next week. If you want to ask any questions of us, hit us up on Twitter, #radio815, any comments, that kind of stuff. If you want to get in touch with me personally, I am at Matt Crandall on Twitter. Marcelo, where can the good people reach you?
If you guys want to talk to me about anything in reference to J.J. Abrams or anything else whatsoever, you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88.
Perfect. So that wraps up the 3rd season of Alias. We start to get into the last half, the end game of the series, when we start talking about season 4 out of 5 seasons next week. So definitely be sure to tune in. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll talk back soon.